Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2023 Transatlantic Bridge Awards. Here to begin this evening's ceremony, I invite to the stage the Ambassador of Sweden, Karin Olofsdotter.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, members of Congress, excellencies, and dear friends, you might wonder, when you are in a house that's basically glass, why you are in a totally black basement with no windows. And when I first saw this many years ago, I thought, okay, maybe we ran out of money, or architect didn't have any more ideas. No, neither of that is true. The reason for us being in this black box is to give you a feeling of what winter and darkness is like in Scandinavia. And then when you enter into the atrium out there, in daytime, you're hit by the light, and that's what we feel in spring. If you would come to northern or Sweden in April, you will see people sitting all over the staircases with their faces in the air, trying to get some sunshine. Well, that's just explaining why you are in this little black box. So fantastic to see you all here. Well, it is really my great honor to host you all here tonight. It is the second edition of our Transatlantic Bridge Awards, and where we are celebrating the transatlantic relationship and Europe, of course. And we will tonight celebrate three individuals for their extraordinary contributions to the EU-US relationship. Well, as I said, this house is a house of glass, most of it. If it is your first time visiting us, you might not be aware that this building was designed to be a physical representation of the values of Sweden, which we try to stand for, and that is openness, transparency, and democracy. And these values also underpin the Swedish presidency of the European Union, which we are holding right now. And for those of you who are not reading about the European Union every day, we have a rotating presidency. We each take turns to hold the presidency for 6 months and then give it to someone else. So after us, it's actually Spain. So when we took over the presidency in January, we identified 4 priorities, and they are maybe not so surprising to you. It's security, competitiveness, green and energy transition, and democratic values and the rule of law. And we will, and we have, continue to work for an EU that is greener, freer, and more secure. Because when it is, we all benefit, Europeans and Americans alike. And of course, this is not possible to do alone. We really need the partnership with the United States, and especially these days when there's a war in Europe, and we have our great friend, Ambassador of Ukraine, here tonight, Ambassador Makarova. And we are all trying to do everything we can to help the brave people of Ukraine fight this horrendous war for all of us. And I hope it's true, and I do believe it is, that when the United States and Europe stand together, we can overcome anything. So I really hope that that's what we will prove to our Ukrainian friends. So it is therefore really important to me to see so many of you here tonight. It really speaks to the vibrancy and robustness of the transatlantic relationship. And as some of you know, this is my last year here in Washington. During my 6 years as ambassador to the US, I have been fortunate to engage in fantastic conversation. As you all know, living in Washington, it's all about political discussions. It is a bubble, but it's a great bubble. And also to travel the country where you can have fantastic conversation, but other conversations. And I will dearly miss the United States. I'm actually heading off to Moscow, where I will be the next Swedish ambassador. So conversations will be a little bit different, I think. So I have had the great honor to host several celebrations, parties, and galas, and I've attended countless dinners, receptions, and lunches, and they are all amazing. This is a town where you just don't eat. You eat, but you also discuss, and I will really miss that. And I will miss the American people a lot. This is the 4th time I live here, and I can tell you that this is one of the best places to be if you want to have a conversation about anything. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you do to strengthen the EU-US relationship, and Sweden as well. We're in the EU, but still. So now it is my great honor to introduce a dear friend and colleague of mine, Stavros Lambrinidis. He is the ambassador of the European Union, doing a fantastic job, and his personal qualities are amazing, but he's also Greek, which is a huge asset. You can either be Irish or Greek, and now he's Greek. So Stavros will lead us through tonight's program, and thank you so much for having this occasion here tonight. And really, have fun tonight and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Karin, thank you. Such an amazing host in the House of Sweden. Indeed, the European Union does have rotating presidencies, and Sweden is the presidency now. So when this May 9 came, it was obvious that Karin and I would sit down and try to do it together, because the European Union is nothing more, nothing less fundamentally than the collective strength, power, unity, vision of its member states. And this is precisely what has gotten us through 73 extremely tough, extremely remarkable, amazing years where Europe managed to turn a labor of hate, the Second World War, where we're killing each other, where we committed the biggest human rights violation in history, the Holocaust. And we came out of it and we said, never again will we allow ourselves either the means or the desire to perpetrate such atrocities on any one of us or anyone in the world. The European Union's birth in 1950 was a labor of love that came out of the labor of hate. And when you understand this, you also understand why it is that Putin is not going to win this war. I've been asked so many times, are the Europeans going to waver? Are they going to tire? Seriously? Seriously? We have imposed the most massive sanctions ever in history as Europe against Russia. We are giving more support to the heroic people of Ukraine as they fight and win than anyone, and will continue to do it. Because what's happening is not just an autocrat who hasn't left the mentality of the Second World War, what followed it, determination that he can wipe off a people off the map he doesn't like, but he is convinced that he can bend the will of American leaders and European leaders to his own through force. He is convinced that we don't have the stomach and the guts to go through this. And I can promise you, as 27 European member states, he will wake up in a very different world if he thinks that's what's going to be the result. Because it's not. It's not. We're going to stand together, and we have. And we stand together for values and rights since we were born, because that's precisely why we were born. Let me just say, on this occasion, because we are celebrating today 3 remarkable Americans, that this relationship, the biggest, most important one in the world, the one between the European Union and the United States, in terms of its economic significance, in terms of its strategic significance, its military significance, this relationship does not go forward without the leadership of remarkable Americans in every walk of life. And so the 27 ambassadors of the European Union here in this room today decided last year that we're going to start celebrating precisely those Americans. We're going to use May 9th in this country, Europe's birthday, to remember why it is that we as Europe today are capable to exercise the power of our values around the world. And it is because we do so hand in hand with this great country here, the United States. It is our collective capacity to portray those values that is making a difference, whether it is in Ukraine or whether it is in any corner of the world where people suffer or rights are being repressed. And it is because of that that we have a special responsibility as Americans and Europeans to make sure that we take care of our house as well. If a calling card in the world is our values and human rights, then we cannot ignore when in our own borders these are being in any which way, shape or form under threat. And we in Europe every day make sure that our house is in order on women's rights, on equality, on fighting racism, which is still existing in our borders in Europe, on ensuring that everything that we do in our own continent can then potentially project itself as a real light in the rest of the world. The three honorees today, in their own work, have reflected European values and in an extraordinary way when it comes to science and to technology, when it comes to economy and trade, when it comes to freedom and journalism. And let me say on this occasion that freedom of the press matters in good times and bad. The world has seen too many journalists jailed around the world, and one of them, most prominently today, is Evan Gershkovich in Russia. Russia has to free this man immediately and do it now. And all of us in this room stand by this. But he's not the only one. Please don't forget this. In too many countries in the world, those rights are violated. Dear friends, we feel the responsibility every day to become better as Europeans. Coming out of the Second World War, we had to do it every step of the way. We didn't come out as 27 big, rich countries. We built this. We struggled this. We worked together for this. We figured out a way to make this happen. And with every crisis, we figured out a new way. Fighting for this dream, which has become a reality, is something that inspires every one of us every day. May I please ask my 27 European Union member state colleagues to stand. All right. I didn't do a lot of introductions at the beginning. I never do. Karen did them. But let me recognize in particular Attorney General Garland. Thank you so much for being here with us. My dear friend Greg Meeks, thank you for being here with us. And so many members of Congress, of the administration, of civil society here in the United States, thank you for being here with us. Now, many people don't know that Europe has a birthday like countries do, but we do. It is May 9th. Many people don't know that we have an anthem, which we do, and which you will hear right now. together with the American anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, and Ode to Joy, performed by Imani Grace Cooper. Imani, where are you? There she is.
Good evening. If you all would stand with me in the singing of our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of all. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround thee, heaven and earth reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, singing bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. All right, dear friends, let's get into the award part of the ceremony. All three of our honorees have fostered deeper public understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing Europe and the United States. Our member states ambassadors and I are immensely proud to recognize them and their achievements. Our first honoree is Dr. Anthony Fauci. And I think you thought you were running out of fans, but no. I mean, it's remarkable. What you have achieved is remarkable. During the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, Dr. Fauci became a household name in Europe and the United States for his rigorous science-based response and his spirit of service. As director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and chief medical advisor to the US President, Dr. Fauci was in close contact with European experts and research centers to gather evidence and promote a level of collaboration that enabled the US and Europe to understand the virus, contain its spread, and develop life-saving solutions at record pace. Throughout his career, Dr. Fauci has promoted American scientific cooperation with European research institutions and trained many European scientists at the national institutes who, in turn, have passed on their knowledge to new generations of European researchers. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci will be introduced by US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. As the nation's doctor, Dr. Murthy lays the foundation for a healthiest country by relying on the best scientific information available to provide clear, consistent, and equitable guidance and resources for the public. Dr. Murthy is currently traveling, but is joining us by video.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Vivek Murthy, Surgeon General of the United States, and it is my true honor to be with you tonight to introduce and celebrate my friend and one of our nation's great public servants, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Years ago, when I was a high school student learning about HIV, I remember reading about Tony Fauci. He and the other brave scientific leaders who guided us during those early days inspired me to work on HIV during my college years, and that began my career in public health. I am one of countless people whose life has been inspired and transformed by Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was born in Brooklyn, New York, to first-generation Italian-American parents. As a young boy, Tony would help his father, who was a pharmacist, by delivering items from the drugstore throughout the neighborhood. His fascination with science blossomed in high school and college and eventually led him to medicine. But never a stranger to hard work, Dr. Fauci put in many hours working construction in New York City to help pay for school. He thought he would be a physician and stay in New York City for the rest of his life, seeing patients and teaching. But it was a fellowship at the National Institutes of Health that changed the course of his life and launched his career as a physician, scientist, and policy leader in Washington, D.C. Dr. Fauci's contributions to the health of America and the world have been legendary. Serving 7 American presidents, over half a century, and collaborating closely with networks of scientists around the world, his remarkable contributions to the fight against infectious diseases, including HIV/AIDS, Ebola, SARS, and COVID, have advanced the health and security of countless people across the globe. When I began working with Dr. Fauci as Surgeon General in 2015, I came to see that this brilliant and dedicated public servant was also kind, compassionate, and brave. I saw these qualities in late-night calls as we deliberated how to address COVID-19. I saw it in discussions with scientific colleagues from Europe and other parts of the world, and I saw it in meetings with the President of the United States. Dr. Fauci extended kindness to all of us. He listened with patience, and even when he disagreed, he did so with grace and respect. Dr. Fauci never hesitates to stand up for those whose health is at risk. Throughout his extraordinary journey, he has held true to the core values of medicine, to help and to heal always. The world needs more people like Tony Fauci, who lead not only with the power of their intellect, but also with the strength of their values. People who lead with knowledge and with love. I can think of no one more deserving of the 2023 Transatlantic Bridge Award than my friend and inspiration, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Congratulations, Tony, and enjoy the ceremony, everyone.
Dr. Fauci, we're so very grateful for everything you have done over the decades of distinguished service. Please, sir, come to the stage to receive the Transatlantic Bridge Award.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you very much, Vivek, wherever you are. This is really a most extraordinary honor and really quite humbling, and I accept it with a great deal of appreciation and gratitude. You know, as was mentioned by Vivek, my dear friend, I mean, I believe the main reason for my even being here and receiving this wonderful honor is the work that I was involved with over many, many years for essentially many, if not all, of the 27 member states of the European Union in my position as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, particularly, but not exclusively, during the 3+ years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Nonetheless, even though everything seems to have been focused on those 3 years, when I reflect upon the experiences that I've had with my colleagues in the 27 member states, this award becomes even more meaningful to me as I reflect, as you've heard, on the 54 years at the National Institutes of Health as a scientist and the 38 years that I spent as a director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. First of all, as a scientist, throughout those 54 years, I had the opportunity, and I would say the privilege and the pleasure of training in my own laboratory a large number of young physicians and scientists, pre- and postdoctoral fellows from a number of the 27 member states of the European Union. And I took the time to sort of reflect over my CV as I was preparing these brief remarks, and I noticed that I have trained individuals in my laboratory from Croatia, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Greece, Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Italy over 58 years that I've been there. Now, the actual number, numerically, clearly is heavily weighted towards Italy because I'm, but nonetheless, Sweden did pretty well also. However, regardless of the country that I was involved with, I must tell you that despite the fact that I officially served as their mentor, as a matter of fact, in some respects, I became their mentee as opposed to their mentor, because the things that I learned from the different and creative and innovative thinking of those bright young men and women who came to my lab anywhere from 2 to 8 years of training with me, not only, I believe, made contributions to the field in general, but also made me a better scientist, because I was able to benefit from their brightness, their resiliency, their creativity, and the contributions that they made. Now, that was my role as a scientist. Now, my other role as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, as I mentioned, for 38 years, up until the time that I recently stepped down about 4 months ago, I had the privilege again of initiating strong collaborations with virtually every country in the European Union in the context of the diseases that range from HIV/AIDS to tuberculosis, pandemic flu, antimicrobial resistance, all of the things that were as much, if not more, of a problem in some of the member states as they were in the United States. In fact, I've signed a number of collaborative agreements and memorandum of understanding over the years, and this intensified over the last 3+ years with COVID. So let me just mention very briefly the situation with COVID, which I think many people do not fully appreciate. That we in the United States, a very rich and developed nation, which has a lot more resources from a scientific standpoint than many of the individual member states of the European Union, is that during the COVID-19 experience, that we benefited as much or more from our relationship with the European countries as they did from us, because we were able to get real-time information from them. They were completely transparent in giving information to us that was clearly beneficial to us. As for example, in Italy, when the first beginning of the pandemic as it spread from China, some of you may remember that northern Italy was hit harder than any other place in the world at the time, and then it spread to the rest of the European Union. It was the literally weekly calls and Zooms that I had with my colleagues in Italy that gave us a very, very good idea of what we had to expect here, and it helped prepare us greatly for the onslaught of what we all experience in this country. So again, I'm deeply honored to accept this 2023 Transatlantic Bridge Award, and I hope, and I believe it will, serve as an inspiration for others like me, younger individuals here in the United States, to encourage them to engage in the kind of collaborative interactions with our European friends and colleagues that I, as a scientist and as an administrator, benefited so greatly personally, and I believe allowed for benefit for my country, the United States. Thank you.
Dear friends, I am very pleased to announce our next honoree Miss Judy Woodruff. Judy has embodied the best of American journalism by far. For so many of us, like myself, whereas students or professionals here in this country, when Judy was still perhaps taking off her career, an absolute inspiration of what balanced, thoughtful, insightful, inquisitive journalism should look like. Her reporting has enhanced the American public's understanding and discourse on international topics, most recently through PBS NewsHour's coverage of Russia's war in Ukraine, as well as in countless interviews that she has conducted with world leaders, including European leaders, on pressing global issues. She has also been a powerful advocate for press freedom, a prerequisite for any strong democracy, and an important priority for the European Union, of course. Starting out as one of the few women covering politics, she became one of the most accomplished broadcast journalists in the United States, while opening the door, and I stress this, for others worldwide by mentoring and championing female reporters through the International Women's Media Foundation. As Europeans, we are deeply grateful for your contributions. Dear friends, as Europeans, again, it is perhaps fitting that Judy has selected another European to introduce her here tonight. Miss Jūratė Kasikas, who is here with us, is a writer and former journalist born in Lithuania. She covered the war in Vietnam as a freelancer and the Middle East and the Carter White House for the Associated Press. She has been active on refugee relief work, traveling to Bosnia, Rwanda, and Afghanistan, among other places. Currently, she's the president of the Kasikas Family Foundation, and I am pleased to be able to invite her to come here to the floor.
Well, you stole my remarks, but why not? I'll add my own thoughts. Judy Woodruff is one of our most respected and admired journalists, and she's noted for very measured coverage of the important events of the day, both national and international. The breadth of her journalist career is very impressive. She has worked for numerous public outlets, news outlets. She has reported on campaigns, she's moderated debates, and she has worked from the White House. And she also has interviewed notable European leaders, as well as most recently President Biden, with a special focus, I think, these days on the war in Ukraine and the threat from Russia to the Europe and, quite honestly, the rest of the world. I, as a Lithuanian, followed that story very, very closely, as you can imagine. Judy, as Mr. Ambassador said, is a very big advocate for women in journalism through the International Women's Media Foundation that she co-founded. And to me, very touchingly, she works tirelessly with families to support families who have children with disabilities. I have known Judy for 40 years. And let me tell you why she is so respected and admired. Oh, of course, we know her resume. Quite simply, she is a wonderful human being. She is kind, she's gracious, she's warm, she's compassionate, she's empathetic, and a very good mother and a loving wife. I am privileged to be your friend, and I am so happy and proud of you for this well-deserved honor. Congratulations.
Wow. Well, first of all, to Ambassador Lambrinidis, I have to say, I'm used to being on the outside of a room like this, trying to get in to cover the story rather than being on the stage along with the people who are being recognized. So this is a role reversal for me, but it's one that I very, very much cherish. And completely honored to be recognized along with these two men who have so served our country with such distinction. There's been no stronger congressional supporter of the Atlantic Alliance than Senator Portman. He has spoken up time and again for this important cause, even at the point where we know today rising isolationism and nationalism inside his own party. It's taken even additional courage to do so. And what do we owe Dr. Fauci? Going back to the AIDS epidemic, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans, literally, who are alive today because of Dr. Fauci's actions, and always under difficult circumstances. So it is just an incredible honor to be recognized with them. And thank you, my dear friend Jūratė, for your generous introduction, for traveling here to be with me on this special occasion. As you've heard, Jūratė, born in Lithuania, she had a remarkable career, has a remarkable career. She served as a foreign correspondent, a war correspondent in Vietnam. She has had a passion for refugees, as you heard from the ambassador. She's traveled the world working tirelessly for that cause. And for her home country, Lithuania, she has been a constant reminder to me, as the head of the Family Foundation, and of so much other work she's done, of the close ties between the United States and Europe, the European continent. And as we know, over time, these countrymen and women, have sought both opportunity and refuge on American shores. And Jūratė, you are the most shining possible example of someone who fits that bill. So thank you very much. So one of the first things I thought about after Ambassador Lambrinidis reached out was how things have kind of come full circle since I was a little girl, which makes this award even more meaningful for me. My father had fought in World War II in Europe. He was assigned to return there in 1951 to a base in Mannheim, Germany. And my mother and I were to join him. I remember clearly my 5th birthday on the ship on the way from New York to Bremerhaven. And I have so many memories of living in Mannheim, going to school there for several years, and driving through downtown Mannheim and other German cities, seeing enormous, what appeared to be, to me, a little girl, 2 or 3 story high, block-long piles of rubble that were left, of course, after the end of the war. What I saw, what everyone saw, was a continent still in recovery then. But what I didn't learn until much later was that same year, 1950-51, was when several European nations coming together, Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and others, began to cooperate, economically at first, and then in other ways, to pull themselves out of what had happened in this war. And of course, that would later grow to become the European Union. But the United States connection to Europe then was strong, with the Marshall Plan, the Truman Doctrine, coming out of a war in which millions of young American and European men and some women made the ultimate sacrifice to save the alliance, to make sure that democracy prevailed. That relationship has been frequently tested. It's had its ups and downs over the almost 8 decades since. And certainly today, it is being tested again, mainly by Russia and by Vladimir Putin with his invasion of Ukraine. But the one constant that has not changed over time are our shared values. A love of freedom, foremost, a belief in democracy and the rule of law, and respect for human rights. There are differences in our systems of government, but these fundamental values endure. And as a journalist, the one that stays close to me is freedom of the press and freedom of speech. It's what has allowed me to do the work that I love. It's what has driven me in the work, a passion for reporting the facts, for truth-seeking, for being the eyes and ears of the public, for holding the powerful accountable. Democracy doesn't exist without it. But today, press freedom is being tested as never before. There's rampant misinformation and disinformation across the free world. We see it in the United States, promoted by both domestic and foreign actors, and you see it across Europe. Here in the US, there is also growing targeting of journalists, mainly verbally, by our political leaders, that has led to a serious decline of trust in the news media by the American people. We know that once that trust is gone, it's very hard to win back. Overseas, including in some European countries, the targeting of journalists has taken a more dangerous turn, with some intimidated or thrown in jail by their own governments, some wrongfully imprisoned by the government of a country where they're reporting, as the ambassador said, the Wall Street Journal's Evan Gershkovich, by the regime of Vladimir Putin. As long as one of us is being held illegally by a regime like that in Russia, or by governments with a friendlier face, we are all at risk. A free press is at risk. Democracy itself is at risk. The press is not the enemy of the people, as Joseph Stalin and other current leaders have charged. We have imperfections, but a free press is the foundation of a free society. This alliance between the United States and the European Union is a strong one, and I can't think of anything more meaningful to use the power of transatlantic bridging for than to stand up for a free press, for factual and transparent reporting, and for holding the powerful accountable. I am so grateful to you for this wonderful recognition. I accept it on behalf of all of the PBS NewsHour team. And I accept it on behalf of all reporters everywhere who are trying to uncover facts, to shine a light into dark places, and to exercise this freedom that is at the very heart of our democratic system. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dear friends, I'm now pleased to announce our last honoree for 2023, Senator Rob Portman. Through 2 terms in the U.S. Senate and 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, Senator Portman has been a strong and consistent supporter of the Transatlantic Alliance through thick and thin. He has often worked across the aisle to support EU-US initiatives and strengthen our indispensable open trade and investment relationship, supporting millions of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic and around the world. As U.S. Trade Representative under President George Bush, Senator Portman actively supported the rules-based international trading system and the role of the World Trade Organization, both of them under great challenge today. His leadership as co-chair of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, which he co-founded in 2015, helped to strengthen U.S. political, economic, and security ties with Ukraine following Russia's 2014 invasion and ahead of its current full-scale war. As a U.S. Senator, his bipartisan caucus work to combat anti-Semitism end human trafficking and protect natural resources has made him a true partner of Europe and European values. Senator Portman has selected his dear colleague and friend, Chris Coons, to introduce him. I will just say that's probably a mistake because I know Coons quite well. He was a college and law school classmate of mine, and he's from Delaware, so I'm getting a little tired of listening to him whine about the chickens and how the EU is being unfair to Delaware chickens. But anyway, that's a parenthesis. It's not for now. It's not for now. Chris Coons.
Senator Chris Coons, and it's my honor to introduce my friend, my colleague, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. Senator Portman had already been in public service for more than a decade when he and I were both elected to the Senate. His time in the House of Representatives, his leadership in the Bush administration of two vital organizations, USTR and OMB, laid the foundation for his remarkably successful dozen years of service in the U.S. Senate. Together, we had the opportunity to get to the President's desk important laws around protecting tropical rainforests and fighting wildlife trafficking. Our wives, Annie and Jane, had the chance to travel with us to Africa just last year to look at the impact of our work together. And Rob and I had a chance to travel to Kyiv last November to jointly present to President Zelensky of Ukraine the Liberty Medal from the U.S. National Constitution Center. More than anything, Rob, I was grateful for your leadership on the generationally important bipartisan infrastructure law and the Respect for Marriage Act. Rob, you've been a great friend and partner. Anyone with whom you can spend 20 hours on a train going to and from Kyiv and like him more at the end of the journey than at the beginning is great company. More than anything, you've been a lifelong believer in free trade, and you're receiving this Transatlantic Bridge Award tonight for your tireless dedication to the values and the economic interests that tie together the United States and the EU. Rob, thank you for your service, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your friendship.
Well, to my friend Stavros and to the 27 other ambassadors who are here from all of the EU member states, thank you for this honor. I'm humbled to receive it, particularly in the company of Judy Woodruff and Anthony Fauci. I enjoyed listening to them and hearing their introductions, and it truly is a humbling experience because they both have just a lifetime of accomplishments that are appropriate for this great award. To my friend Chris Coons, you know, I'm not going to miss everything about the Senate, believe me. But I'm going to miss Chris and so many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who are sincere about legislating and approaching some very serious issues we face today in a bipartisan manner. So I thank you, Chris, for that nice introduction. We did spend a lot of time on the train together. Oksana Markarova is here, the ambassador. She's been on that train a lot, too. We were told it had showers and a dining car and that we would have plush accommodations. The bunk was about as wide as this podium and twice as hard. But it was totally worth it every time I've gone. I've gone about a dozen times since the Revolution of Dignity back in 2014. To my friends who are hosting us tonight, particularly Olaf's daughter, who is here with us, Ambassador Olaf's daughter. That's what it means, Olaf's daughter, okay. I was informed of that tonight. Thank you for opening up your beautiful home for us. And I think all of us as Americans would like to say that we are very looking forward to your joining us as a full-fledged member of NATO this summer. Thank you. I want to thank Sweden not just for opening up this beautiful venue to us, but also for opening my eyes at a young age. At 12 years old, I entered some contest to go on an exchange program and found myself in Sweden, living with a family in Malmö, Sweden, watching the first person to step onto the moon on a small black and white TV set in an apartment building in Malmö, Sweden. And it changed my life because it got me thinking about this bigger world, a kid from Cincinnati, Ohio. It led me to a lot of different experiences in Europe, including studying in France during college, and then, of course, taking that semester to travel from one end of the EU to the other, using the advantage of the Eurorail pass. During that time, I was able to go see some of my family throughout Europe, places that I called my ancestral homeland, which included almost every country in Europe. Switzerland, Ireland, Scotland, Germany, to name a few. But that too, over time, turned into a lot of trips back and forth and turned into, for me, a deep appreciation for the shared values we have. And they've been talked about tonight, but this is what ties us, by destiny as much as choice, between the European continent and the United States of America. That transatlantic bond is inexorably tied to those shared values. And it's about democracy, it's about human rights, it's about rule of law, it's about a belief in the free enterprise system helping to empower people. It's about common decency, and as we see today in Europe, it has been for the last almost 80 years about a peace that is now in danger. We are like a family. By the way, sometimes families have squabbles. This is why there are 27 EU ambassadors here to nurture the relationship. Does the word IRA mean anything to you? Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But you know what? Though we squabble as family members, we also come together, and I'm very pleased to say that we are coming together on some incredibly important issues right now. Russia's unprovoked, illegal, and brutal war on Ukraine has been a heartbreaking thing to watch for all of us. I will say that just as my father, who was a World War II veteran, saw in the 1940s, and by the way, his grandfather was born in Europe, but just as he saw then, at a dark time, we managed to come together. And I think our ties with the EU are stronger than they have been actually for decades right now because of that. We have a unity of purpose now with the European family. And as heartbreaking as the war has been, that has been heartening to see. And tonight, I urge us to redouble our efforts together. Over the past 15 months, as the German ambassador and I spoke earlier this evening, I've sometimes been critical of both our government not moving fast enough and the Europeans not moving fast enough on sanctions or on military assistance for Ukraine. Tonight, I'm here to commend the EU. As some of you know who are in the audience here today, the European Union is taking some very important steps right now to try to strengthen Ukraine's resolve and to provide more assistance. Just last week, the European Council adopted a €1 billion agreement under the European Peace Facility to finance joint procurement of artillery munitions and possibly even missiles. This is incredibly important, and it is probably one of the more important things that we are doing together right now, which is to ensure that we are going to provide Ukraine over time the ammunition, in particular, and other weapons that they need. When combined with a previous agreement to compensate EU members that donated ammunition to Ukraine, this is a combined €2 billion by the EU, an investment in military assistance for Ukraine. So again, I applaud the EU for this action. It's a large and steady supply of artillery ammunition that will be vital to the war effort and to the possibility of this counteroffensive being successful. We've all seen stories of how slow the Western procurement has been of these ammunitions particularly, and so this will help both with regard to Europe and with regard to the United States to ensure that we can get to Ukraine what they need. and frankly, revamp our defense industries, which needed it badly, it turned out, and provide, of course, Ukraine, again, what they need to be able to undertake the much anticipated counteroffensive. As America has shouldered much of the burden in providing military assistance, and we have, and each of you as taxpayers have, and my constituents in Ohio have, it's important that the EU also help with regard to aid to Ukraine. And again, I commend the EU because there has been a recent decision to pledge 18 billion euros in budget support for the Ukrainian government this year, by the way, which is more than the United States is projected to provide. To my former colleagues who are talking about we'll do more when Europe does more, well, with regard to the budget aid, this year Europe will do more than the United States. And again, I applaud them for that. This assistance is absolutely critical to so many things. It allows Ukraine to cover critical services for its citizens. By the way, this includes salaries for those brave first responders who are today in Ukraine as we celebrate this evening the great relationship we have with the European Union. Once again, Russia is bombarding Ukrainian cities, including missiles that attacked Kyiv yesterday, over 23 of them. And those first responders who respond to that and save people's lives are being supported by your efforts. So this European funding will actually go to their salaries, as well as so many others who are helping to deal with the brutality of this war. Without this money, in my view, the Ukrainian government could well collapse. And by doing so, without firing another shot, Vladimir Putin would win this war. We cannot let that happen. I wish I could say the same with regard to trade between our country and the European Union. We have not made as much progress there. The strengthening of our bonds is important across the board, and I think that is one where we can do much more. I spoke earlier tonight about this with some of you, but I do believe that there's a great opportunity here, and that would be to complete the FTA, which is probably 4/5 of the way done with the UK. That's a free trade agreement, and then use it as a template for a similar agreement with the European Union. This makes all the sense in the world when we're facing adversaries globally that we share, when we can find more efficiencies, when we can work together to expand opportunity for everyone. And our trade agreements, as you know, help with regard to everything from labor rights and the environment to people's opportunity to have access to the rule of law. So I would hope that we would do that. I would hope that in the WTO that we would see the European Union and the United States work more closely together, as I did when I was U.S. Trade Rep. The European Union was always with us on WTO issues. The World Trade Organization is no longer an organization that is functional, frankly, and so it's time for us to step up. And there are specific ways we can work together with other like-minded countries to be able to revamp the WTO. So my hope is that we will see that. My hope is that we will see us working even more closely together across the board, particularly at a time when we see the danger and volatility in the world, and we see the complexity of the problems we face. And again, finishing where I started, when we see that our shared heritage, our shared values of democracy and free markets, human rights, we must strengthen our partnership to be able to tell all of our citizens that we will have a brighter future for the EU and the United States. Thank you again for having me here tonight.
Okay, so this completes a ceremony. Now, I do know I have a photographer here who's very anxious to take a couple of photos, and I'm not sure how we're going to do this. You want us to, you want to stand up here and we stand here and you can take the whole room? Yes, of course. All right. So, may I ask, by the way, Oksana, the Attorney General, I don't know if Greg is still here. Greg means to come, no, to come join us. May I ask our awardees to stand here, and may I ask all our ambassadors to stand up as well. So we